In the jungles of Bougainville, where the air was thick with heat and fear, the U.S. infantry faced an enemy they could barely see, an enemy buried deep inside a fortress so well engineered, soldiers called it the Hornet's Nest. And on November 21, 1943, one weapon, improvised, untested, and terrifying, would turn the tide of battle. This is its story. The Japanese defensive system on Bougainville was not merely a collection of bunkers. It was a masterpiece of battlefield engineering, designed with one purpose in mind: to grind advancing American units to a halt. Soldiers who first encountered it described it as alive, a defense that seemed to shift and react with almost human instinct. They soon gave it a name that captured its danger perfectly: the Hornet's Nest. Unlike traditional trench networks, the Hornet's Nest was carved deep into the jungle's flesh. The Japanese had spent months reinforcing their positions with coconut logs, layers of packed mud, and subterranean galleries that allowed them to move invisibly beneath the surface. Overhead cover was so thick that artillery shells often exploded harmlessly on top, leaving the defenders below shaken but very much alive. Many firing positions were protected by multiple layers of logs, each angled to deflect incoming grenades or bullets, but physical construction was only half the threat. The jungle itself acted as a natural shield. Dense undergrowth, towering palms, and twisting vines made visibility almost non-existent. American scouts would find themselves staring into tangles of shadows, each shadow potentially hiding a rifle barrel or the slit of a pillbox. Machine gun positions were arranged in overlapping arcs, meaning a soldier who exposed himself to eliminate one bunker would instantly be targeted from another. Japanese camouflage techniques bordered on the supernatural. Firing slits were disguised with foliage. Tunnel entrances were hidden behind false log walls. Some positions had escape shafts emerging dozens of feet away, allowing defenders to reappear behind advancing troops. More than once, Americans believed they had silenced a bunker, only for the same gun to open fire moments later from a different angle. To U.S. Marines and soldiers, it felt like fighting an enemy embedded not in the ground, but in the jungle itself. Every attempt to advance led to the same result: men pinned down, casualties rising, momentum stopped cold. The Hornet's Nest had to be neutralized, but there was no simple path forward. It demanded a weapon the Americans didn't yet have, something that could reach into the jungle's hidden veins and burn out the defensive system from within. For days, American infantry threw themselves against the Hornet's Nest in relentless, punishing assaults. Each attack began with cautious optimism, careful planning, coordinated fire support, and the determined belief that this time the line would break. But every assault ended the same way: squads pinned down, casualties mounting, and survivors crawling back through mud and foliage, shaken by the ferocity of the Japanese defense. The problem was brutally simple. The Japanese had created a fortified system immune to conventional tactics. Machine gun nests were placed so densely and so cleverly that any movement, no matter how small, drew immediate, concentrated fire. Troops reported that the snap of a twig could bring a storm of bullets ripping through the leaves. Mortar fire, normally reliable for clearing entrenched positions, vanished harmlessly into the deep, reinforced bunkers. Grenades proved almost useless. Many firing slits were angled downward or shielded with interlocking logs, bouncing explosives harmlessly off the walls. Worse, some bunkers connected through hidden tunnels, letting defenders abandon one position and reappear moments later from another. Infantry approaching with handheld flamethrowers were vulnerable from the start, exposed to constant fire. Commanders realized the brutal truth: infantry couldn't advance without suppressing the bunkers. But they couldn't suppress the bunkers without advancing. Artillery couldn't penetrate, grenades couldn't reach, flamethrowers couldn't get close. The Hornet's Nest wasn't just a defensive position, it was a tactical deadlock, and the battlefield demanded a radically different solution: something armored, something powerful, and something capable of reaching inside the enemy's fortifications. The breakthrough didn't come from a general's headquarters, it came from the ingenuity of frontline engineers and ordnance specialists. They understood the battlefield not as a map, but as a living, dangerous maze. The solution was bold: convert an M3A1 Stuart light tank into a flamethrower platform. Flamethrowers were normally carried by infantry, slow, exposed, and vulnerable. Tanks had mobility and armor, but their guns couldn't reach inside bunkers. Combining the two seemed impossible, but in Bougainville, necessity outweighed caution. Engineers removed the Stuart's 37mm cannon and installed a Navy Mk1 flamethrower. Fuel tanks were wedged into the hull, connected by pumps capable of projecting flaming fuel 60 to 80 yards, far enough to reach hidden bunker entrances. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't safe, but it was effective. Crews understood the risk. A penetrating hit could ignite the vehicle instantly, yet they volunteered, knowing this weapon could save countless infantry lives. By November 1943, the flamethrower Stuart was ready, a hand-built tool of fire and ingenuity, poised to face the Hornet's nest. The Stuart had been a reconnaissance tank, small and lightly armed. In the Pacific jungle, speed and maneuverability were more important than armor or firepower. The flamethrower conversion turned its weaknesses into advantages. Inside, fuel tanks crowded every available space. Heat rose to unbearable levels. Smoke and the tang of burning oil filled the cabin. Crews pressed on despite knowing a single hit could turn their vehicle into an inferno. Its small frame allowed it to weave through narrow jungle trails. Its engine responded quickly to stop and start maneuvers. And when the flamethrower ignited, it unleashed terror on the Japanese defenders, pouring fire into tunnels, slits, and trenches. This was no longer a scout tank. It was a flamethrower assault vehicle, capable of reshaping the battlefield in minutes. The approach to the Hornet's nest began at dawn, under a humid gray sky that pressed down like a lid. The air was thick, heavy with moisture, and carried the low drone of insects, a jungle symphony that never ceased. But beneath that natural chorus was something else: tension. Every soldier felt it. The jungle ahead hid not just the enemy, but the unknown. For the M3A1 Stuart flamethrower crews, the journey forward was a test of patience and nerves. The jungle floor was a patchwork of mud, tangled roots, and fallen branches, each threatening to bog the tank or halt its progress entirely. These weren't roads, they were barely trails, narrow corridors carved by days of infantry movement, hemmed in by dense vegetation that clawed at the tank's sides. Infantrymen flanked the Stuart, guiding it step by step. They pointed out obstacles the tank commander couldn't see, tapped the hull to signal direction changes, and cleared debris when necessary. The relationship between tank and infantry was symbiotic. The tank needed the infantry's eyes. The infantry needed the tank's firepower. Neither could survive the Hornet's nest without the other. Japanese resistance began early. Sniper fire cracked from the canopy, bullets slapping against tree trunks and foliage. The Stuart's armor shrugged off most rifle rounds, but the crew inside flinched at every metallic ping, each one a reminder that the enemy watched their every move. Mortar rounds occasionally thumped in the distance, sending geysers of earth skyward. The Japanese were probing, testing the column's advance, preparing for the real fight ahead. Visibility was almost non-existent. From the commander's hatch, the world was a wall of green, leaves, vines, shadows. The tank engine growled loudly, echoing between the trees, a sound impossible to conceal. Every man knew the noise made the Stuart a magnet for enemy fire, but there was no alternative. Stealth was impossible in a machine of steel. Slowly, methodically, the column pushed forward, and then, as the jungle thinned just slightly, the terrain dipped. Ahead lay the Hornet's nest, a maze of fortifications buried under brush so thick it looked like nothing at all. But the veterans recognized it immediately, the subtle shapes, the unnatural lines, the quiet stillness of a place waiting to erupt. The battle for Bougainville's deadliest strongpoint was about to begin. At the command to engage, the M3A1 Stuart flamethrower came alive. Its engine roared, a mechanical growl that seemed to echo through the dense jungle. Then came the first blast, a column of fire arcing from the tank, surging into the nearest bunker slit like a liquid inferno. The air filled with smoke and heat, carrying the unmistakable scent of burning vegetation and fuel. The jungle itself seemed to recoil as the flames licked over roots, logs, and brush. The Japanese defenders reacted instantly. Machine guns opened up, hammering the advancing tank with bullets that ricocheted off the Stuart's armor. Mortar rounds exploded nearby, sending plumes of earth into the air, yet the tank pressed forward. Each burst of flame was deliberate, calculated, aimed not to incinerate the jungle indiscriminately, but to strike directly at the fortifications that had been immune to days of infantry assaults. Infantry followed closely, using the flames as both shield and guide. Where the fire had cleared trenches and tunnel openings, soldiers advanced, moving methodically through areas that would have otherwise been death traps. They threw grenades into weakened positions, secured fallen bunkers, and marked targets for the next advance. The flames weren't just destructive, they were a signal, a tool that reshaped the battlefield with every surge. As the Stuart continued its assault, more of the Hornet's nest began to collapse. Hidden tunnels were revealed by firelight, bunkers heated from within exploded or caught in flames. What had taken days of failed infantry attacks was being accomplished in mere minutes. The Hornet's nest, a labyrinth that had terrorized American forces, was being unraveled, its defenders thrown into chaos. But the danger remained constant. Every advance was accompanied by bullets, shrapnel, and the ever-present threat that one well-placed round could ignite the Stuart's fuel. Yet the crews pressed on, fueled by necessity, determination, and the knowledge that the infantry following behind would not survive without them. By the time the initial assault ended, the Hornet's nest had been shattered. American forces had, for the first time, imposed their will upon a position once thought unassailable. The combination of armor, fire, and human courage had achieved the impossible, and in the process, redefined jungle warfare forever. Amid the roar of engines, the crack of gunfire, and the choking smoke of burning bunkers, courage revealed itself in countless small acts, moments that would never make the headlines but that defined the battle. Heroism on Bougainville was measured not in medals, but in choices made under fire, when every instinct screamed for self-preservation. Tank crews, for instance, remained inside their sweltering M3A1 Stuarts, enduring heat so intense it threatened to overwhelm them. The interior was a furnace of metal and fuel, the air thick with smoke and the tang of burning oil. Yet they pressed forward, fully aware that a single penetrating hit could transform their vehicle into a blazing tomb. They did not falter, knowing that the infantry advancing behind them depended on every second of protection their flame gave. Infantrymen, for their part, exposed themselves repeatedly to guide the tanks through the maze of jungle. They crawled over mud, roots, and debris, often inches from concealed enemy positions, tapping on the tank or waving signals to indicate openings or obstacles. Their movements were deliberate, controlled, but every second carried immense risk. Landmines, snipers, and hidden machine guns were constant threats. Medics wove through the chaos, attending to wounded soldiers under relentless fire. Some risked being pinned down themselves, crawling into exposed areas to apply bandages, administer morphine, or carry the wounded to safety. Others crawled ahead of the tanks, marking targets for the flamethrower so that soldiers behind could advance with reduced risk. Even seemingly small actions could be acts of extraordinary bravery. Soldiers who ran forward to remove debris, throw grenades into smoldering bunkers, or simply hold their ground in open terrain did so, knowing that hesitation could mean death, not just for themselves but for their comrades. Together, these acts of courage created a chain reaction. The tanks could not succeed without infantry guidance. Infantry could not survive without the firepower of the Stuarts, and both relied on medics to keep the wounded in the fight. In a battlefield dominated by fear, sweat, and smoke, men found a way to act with selflessness, determination, and daring. In Bougainville, heroism was not a single moment. It was a constant, living presence, moving through the jungle with each man who refused to give ground, no matter the cost. The destruction of the Hornet's nest marked a decisive turning point, not just for the battle at Bougainville, but for American jungle warfare as a whole. What had once seemed an impregnable network of bunkers, tunnels, and machine gun nests had been reduced to smoldering ruins. Infantry could finally advance without being cut down by unseen fire. The psychological impact was just as significant as the physical destruction. American soldiers, long demoralized by repeated failures to breach the position, felt a surge of confidence as the Stuarts led the way through the jungle. With the Hornet's nest neutralized, U.S. forces were able to secure critical ground rapidly. Lines that had been stagnant for days suddenly opened up. Troops moved to consolidate their defensive perimeter, build fortifications, and prepare for further offensives in Bougainville's treacherous terrain. The momentum shift was immediate. What had been a stalemate became an opportunity to exploit weaknesses in Japanese defensive networks across the island. More importantly, the battle demonstrated that conventional infantry tactics alone were insufficient against deeply entrenched jungle defenses. The combination of armored firepower, the reach of flame, and close coordination with infantry became a blueprint for overcoming the Pacific's fortified positions. Commanders quickly recognized that flame-equipped tanks could do what human soldiers could not: reach inside bunkers, neutralize hidden snipers, and force defenders out of their protective nests. The success at Bougainville sparked rapid expansion of flamethrower-equipped units across the Pacific theater. Tanks like the M3A1 Stuart, once considered lightly armed reconnaissance vehicles, were now central to offensive operations. Engineers refined flamethrower systems, integrating them into heavier Sherman tanks for future island campaigns. The lessons learned in Bougainville informed the planning and execution of assaults on Saipan, Tinian, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. Strategically, the battle changed the way American forces approached fortified positions. Static, underground defenses that had been feared for their invulnerability could now be systematically dismantled. The Hornet's nest became a case study in the power of innovation, ingenuity, and coordination, proof that no defensive network, however well-designed, could withstand the combination of human courage and mechanical innovation. Bougainville was not just a victory, it was a revelation. The American military had learned that adaptability, creativity, and calculated risk were as essential to jungle warfare as bullets, grenades, and artillery. And in that revelation, the flamethrower tank had cemented its place as an indispensable tool in the fight across the Pacific. The Battle of Bougainville was more than a single tactical victory. It marked a strategic evolution in the American approach to Pacific warfare. Before the engagement, entrenched Japanese defenses were considered nearly invulnerable. Pillboxes, tunnels, and interlocking machine gun positions had proven deadly against infantry assaults, artillery barrages, and standard armored support. The Hornet's nest stood as a testament to the effectiveness of these methods. Yet, the introduction of flamethrower-equipped tanks changed the equation entirely. American commanders quickly realized that flame could neutralize the advantages of underground bunkers, eliminating the need for costly frontal infantry assaults. The combination of mobility, armor, and firepower allowed tank crews to strike where soldiers could not. Japanese defenders were forced to adapt or be destroyed. Many retreated deeper into tunnels, abandoned fixed positions, or altered their defensive strategies entirely, making them more predictable and easier to target in subsequent engagements. The success at Bougainville directly influenced planning for future island campaigns. Flamethrower tanks became standard in the assaults on Saipan and Tinian, where dense fortifications and hidden pillboxes had previously slowed operations. On Iwo Jima and Okinawa, they proved invaluable, clearing bunkers and tunnels that would have otherwise inflicted severe casualties. Each battle reinforced a single principle: the flamethrower tank was not merely a weapon, it was a force multiplier, saving countless infantry lives while breaking the enemy's defensive cohesion. Beyond immediate battlefield effects, Bougainville also inspired further innovation in armored warfare. Engineers refined flame projection systems, integrated them into heavier Sherman tanks, and experimented with tactics combining armor, infantry, and artillery in coordinated assaults. The success of the M3A1 Stuart and its successors demonstrated that battlefield improvisation, when guided by necessity and ingenuity, could shape doctrine for years to come. In the broader context of the Pacific War, the flamethrower tank's emergence highlighted a critical truth: adaptability and creativity often mattered as much as numbers and firepower. The improvised Stuart at Bougainville became the blueprint for a new era of mechanized assault, showing that no position, no matter how fortified, was beyond reach when human courage and technological ingenuity worked together. Bougainville was not just a turning point in one battle, it was a turning point in the entire Pacific campaign, proving that innovation could overcome even the most formidable defenses. Bougainville taught the U.S. military a harsh lesson: that in jungle warfare, innovation is often the key to survival. The flamethrower tank, conceived in a workshop, tested in battle, and perfected under fire, became one of the most decisive weapons of the Pacific War. But beyond the machinery, this is the story of the soldiers who operated it, men who climbed into a steel box filled with fuel and flame, knowing full well the risks, yet choosing to advance. Their courage turned the tide at Bougainville and left a legacy written in heat and steel.